Morning, everyone. See the numbers going up. Good morning. Hold off for a minute or two. People are probably finishing meetings, whatever it might be. Hopefully you can hear us and see us all okay.
Morning, everyone.
Okay, I'm going to give it maybe like 30 seconds or so, Matt. I think numbers have slowed a bit, but then we'll kick off. Keep an eye on the numbers coming in. Okay. Okay, brilliant. So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining this session. Obviously, a very important session to mark kind of Alcohol Awareness Week. This week, if you didn't know. Today is an honour for me to be hosting this session, but also for Elevo, the organisation that also hosted the last session with you back in May. We're supporting Matt and the team at the Lord Mayor's Appeal on delivering some content to help you. But today, not about us, not about Elevo, but it's really important that we have Steve McCann here today. Some of you may know, may not know. And we're going to spend a lot of time hearing Steve's story, but also the important work that Steve does in this space. And yeah, I had the honour of kind of speaking to Steve over the last 3 weeks, and I think he will be kind of really excited by the kind of some of the work that he's doing, but also where that work comes from, which I think is very authentic, very genuine, and really, really important we all hear about it. A couple of kind of, just important points really before we get going. Like this conversation may touch on suicide. We may talk about suicide. I want you to know that. I don't want you to feel as if you have to sit and listen to conversations around suicide if you do not yourself feel ready to hear that. But I wanted to give you the heads up that may come up in part of my introduction and maybe as part of Steve's conversation as well. The rough agenda, of course, we'll do our best to stick to it, but who knows? We are going to have about 5-10 minutes time to share my introduction, a bit more context to who we are and why we're here. Kind of a bit of some honesty and kind of a real story, really, as part of that, and why I think this conversation is important from a personal perspective. We're then going to hear about Steve's work. So kind of very direct, like really clear on what we're going to kind of hear, what we can do to help prevent and support those in our workplace when it comes to alcohol. And then we're going to go back and hear Steve's story, and then we're going to open up for questions at the end. So if you do have questions, take note of them, drop them in the chat, use that as a space to fire any thoughts or comments as we go. I think it kind of gives a kind of bit more energy and excitement for us to kind of deliver it too. So plenty of time. Please hold those conversations towards the end. If anything's kind of bubbling, I'll pop it in the chat or hold it back, and we'll open up the floor for any conversations whatsoever. So hopefully that sounds like a good plan. I can't see anyone, but I can see the numbers slowly creeping up. So for those that just joined and I missed that, I did say that we will be talking about suicide as part of this conversation, and that as a warning for you if you do not want to listen to conversations about suicide. So yes, like I said, the organisation is hosting this Elevo. I'm the founder of Elevo. We are an organisation that supports a large number of companies across the UK and the world, a range of multinationals on consultancy projects, strategy projects, and training work. All well and good, but today, really, I want to tell you about the why I'm here, not what the golden story around who we support, because I think it's very boring and a lot of people know that and don't really care. The reality of our business is that it started when it comes from vulnerability in the workplace. I was an employee at Mars. We were actually a small little startup that got acquired by Mars. And when it's a business of 120,000 people, sometimes you just don't know how mental health conversations are going to go. And this was prior to COVID. I was somebody that never shared any of my mental health context, really. Nothing around my own personal life, my family's context, any of my struggles in a workplace setting. In fact, I went a decade of actually keeping that fact quiet and hidden from every single employer that I went through government and through the corporate world, but also when it comes to my own personal life. I grew up in West Cornwall, St Ives, where a lot of people holiday and enjoy like barbecues and sunshine on the beach. Like for me, I have a love-hate relationship. It is where I struggled the most. And sadly, it's where I lost my father to suicide when I was 12 years old. I was very lucky in my childhood in that I had a huge amount that on paper looked like a picturesque childhood. My mum and dad managed a campsite, so I had the kind of joys of essentially having a holiday for about 4 months of the year where people would come on holiday pretty much in the back garden that my mum and dad managed. But I remember vividly, the day where we woke up as a family, and my dad wasn't there. And it's a moment that I kind of look back on now, and I still sometimes think it's surreal. But I have spent around 18 years studying exactly why he got to that place and why so many people get to that place. After that moment, my coping mechanism was to hide that it happened, which might sound somewhat bizarre. But as a 12-year-old boy who didn't want to be associated to suicide and mental ill health, I actually lied at every juncture I could. So that started pretty much 24 hours after. I demanded that I'd go to school. My mum didn't let me go to school on the day, but she let me go after because I refused any other reality that this had happened. I would have these kind of moments where I would get challenged with what had happened, and it would be a physical kind of showing where I'd be like, "Really? Is this has actually happened to us?" And I would close it out by holding kind of the top of my nose and squeezing my eyes tight, and then kind of snapping back into reality. And it was just a coping mechanism that got me through the day. The reason why I tell you that is that that hidden part of me, the hidden struggle, was only visible to me. I would tactically show up in environments such as school with a persona that I wanted teachers and friends and parents to see. I put everything into education and sport. They were my two kind of outlets. When I was personally by myself, I struggled massively. That happened pretty much through to the university period of my life. I was very lucky to get a job at the Royal Mint, traveling the world, selling gold and silver to people who probably had way too much money. But that was my job. I was there selling at trade shows and events across the world on behalf of the Royal Mint. And it was a job that I could dress how I wanted to. I could tell people how amazing this job was, how well I was doing. And this was like this kind of mantra that I had. I would almost like repeat every single time. The reality was I couldn't get myself out of bed at that period of time of my life. The photos wouldn't suggest so because I was very good at sharing the photos that I wanted people to see. I would tactically plan that. I couldn't keep waking up, dreading the day with no energy, with quite erratic spending, a large amount of addictive behaviors during that time, and starting to question my own place on this earth, which feels bizarre because I saw the realities of what losing to someone to suicide can actually do. But I got to that place when I was in the job that I was aiming for a large number of years. I quit all of that and I ran because running was my escape mechanism for most of my life. And I ran to a new job. I was quite gripped by the new job, but I was gripped because it was in London and it was a new startup and it gave me a completely fresh start and nobody knew me again. I was very lucky that when I was in central London, there was a charity campaign by the charity Calm, the campaign against living miserably, which you may know about. They had a stunt in central London, which many of you might be probably looking across to that part of the South Bank where the exhibit and stunt was. And it was called Project 84. There were people standing on top of the ITV Tower studio back in 2018. The reason why it was called Project 84 was because 84 men every single week in the UK die by suicide. It's predicted that 10% of those people will be under the influence of alcohol or abusing alcohol during that time. That number is now predicted at 93 men. That's just men. And I witnessed this campaign, these physical statues placed on top of the rooftop as I was about to start work, pretty much at this time, like 9:30, 10 o'clock on the morning of this campaign. And you had the major news presenters across the world talking about suicide. You had celebrities talking about suicide, all the newspaper outlets talking about suicide. It was the first time in my life that I witnessed it. And I could read and relate to me in that, but also my dad and my family. And the reason why I tell you that is because it happened all in work. And it was a single creative moment that got me to realize that it's my hidden part, but it's actually the biggest part that drives and makes me who I am, but also the cause of much of my trouble. And the workplace, whilst that wasn't a workplace campaign or initiative, it happened in work. And then I felt supported in work when I started to share. So that was a decade of hiding it. And I just slowly but surely started to tell people, actually, yeah, my dad did die by suicide. And this is who I am. This is me. And this is what drives me. And this is why I talk and act and am driven in the way that I am around the topic. And slowly I just started talking to more people. And our very small business of 10 people was then acquired by a 120,000 person company such as Mars. And it gave me an opportunity to positively impact that business when it comes to mental health, suicide, and a whole range of other preventative measures around addiction. And that's where the Elevo business came from. But it happened in a spark. So webinars are great, all well and good in their own right. They are meant to be a spark. They are meant to relate to the individual stories that we hear, but they're meant to be a starting point. It's how we embed that change and the stories and the services that we then could do to support people. And the reason why it's important right now more than ever is that we know how much turbulence is happening in society, whether it's cost of living related, whether it's AI, anxiety, whatever it might be. We're in it and we're in it for a long period of time. There's a huge number of predictions of this period of turbulence being the new normal. But this is not a period of change because of the kind of systemic changes we're seeing is just going to be the norm. So if we don't know the struggles and the realities of some of our people in our workplace, well, how on earth are we going to be able to prevent some of the struggles that are actually very clear and very obvious down the line because we're facing so much significant challenge? And whenever we've been in a financial crisis or any form of systemic change in society, there tends to be a rise in suicide. And we know addictive behaviors and addictive problems are so connected. So I hope this acts as a moment for us to take stock and actually think about the people that are in our workplace and hopefully act as a starting point. And I'm sure many of you are doing some amazing work. So it's not to say that you're not on this topic. So that's me. That was 10 minutes on the dot. That very rarely happens because I end up talking too much. But now I would like to introduce the incredible Steve, very powerful kind of story. And Steve, the floor is yours. And I will jump back in 20, 25 minutes or so and we have a conversation about kind of your story.
It's perfect. Thank you so much, Harry, and thank you for your honesty. And yeah, that was absolutely brilliant. And Harry and I have only known each other just while we've been working on this project, but I can tell you, I'm so privileged to count Harry as someone that I truly admire and a friend and someone I want to work with an awful lot. And he kept to time as well, so he really is perfect. Um, I'm just going to share my screen as I've been saying for the last few years, it feels like. Okay, so. Okay, cool. So as everyone knows, this is Alcohol Awareness Week, and I wanted to talk about this isn't really a typical deck, so to speak. I'm not going to go through exactly how we work and what we do and so on. I'll do a bit of that, but I just want to share some of the insights of not just this week, but of the last, I'd say 10 or 11 months, really. I do a huge amount of work in alcohol awareness, addiction. We do some social mobility work, but addiction is really the what we're being known for, and it's been an incredible experience. And this week has been nothing short of remarkable. So I'll just give you a bit of background on us. So this is MCG's advisory board. The reason I mention our advisory board is, well, firstly, I'm incredibly privileged to have these individuals in our corner, but we have a huge array of backgrounds, not just where people originate from, but also from where they are in their career. We've got some people that are in training contracts with law firms. We've got senior executives that have worked for global organizations, but they also are great when we talk about lived experience. And, I will never be able to speak to the experience of many people on my board, but we can ask them for their opinions. Sometimes they'll come along to our talks. We got Sharu Azadi, who's a best-selling author that was just recently on Diary of a CEO. She's an addiction specialist. Mandeep Saur is an activist in the gay community, but also an incredible CEO and sustainability expert in her own right. We have Barbara Makura, who is a social mobility advocate. Richie Sakiadu, who is the co-founder of the Tennis Blacklist. I mean, it goes on like that. That we have some wonderful individuals, but I think it's so important now in this day and age that we can have people speaking about their own experience, and there's nothing more powerful, in my opinion. We got Professor Simon Gilbody, who actually met Lord Mayor's Appeal event, who is in the top 1% cited scientists in the world regarding all things about loneliness in the workplace, and he's absolutely fantastic. Professor Paul Galdas is the Movember professor. So yeah, we have a wonderful group of people, many of whom come with us on our awareness talks and help with delivery. So yeah, I just wanted to share who is behind MCG because we have a wonderful group. Yeah, we work with a lot of organisations across the City of London and also globally. We're working on a platform we're working with a platform in Dubai where we're creating content around what you would call, I suppose, a complex relationship between the expats and alcohol in places like Dubai. A lot of that is linked, as Harry said, to to stress in the workplace. We're working with organizations in Ireland, for example, for the same thing. We're creating content for a platform there, but also I specifically wanted to go around the UK. We do a lot of work in the city, of course, and I sit on the steering committee myself for This Is Me. But I wanted to get a sense of what was going on in the UK, so I went to Belfast and met companies there, and then down to Dublin, and we've gone all around the UK, as I say. And even this afternoon, I'm meeting with the barristers' chambers in Liverpool. So we work with all manner of organisations, but it's interesting just to find out, how everyone's feeling. What's London like compared to Bristol? What's going on in Manchester? Things like that. So as I say, we work with some incredibly prestigious organisations. The Legal Services Board really wonderfully published a paper of ours recently, which we're incredibly grateful for, and that shows us that. Even 5 years ago, this conversation would not be happening, in our opinion. We spoke at the Private Equity Lawyers Forum again. People were saying to me, "Gosh, I'm so thrilled that this is finally here because we didn't know how to approach it." Yesterday, which was a real moment for us, we spoke at the Bank of England, myself and Rebecca Banks, who's one of our advisory board members. And that was the first time the Bank of England had ever done an addiction awareness talk, and we did our lived experience. And it was just amazing. And a moment that we just thought, wow, this is incredible that we're doing this. We speak with the Mind Forward Alliance, we work with the Mindful Business Charter. We spoke for the Mindful Business Charter on Tuesday. I was interviewed by Richard Martin, their wonderful CEO. And again, it was a fantastic session, and I've had numerous requests to continue the conversation, come into our workplace, talk to us about it. I wish more people could have heard this, that type of thing. So I'm just incredibly delighted as someone that suffers from addiction myself that this work is happening. And I think it's really important to understand that it's now the time to talk about this stuff. Sometimes it took courage from individuals and organizations to say, "Oh, yeah, yeah, okay, let's talk about it." But oh gosh, we're not comfortable with it now. We all know what the city's like. It's a bit of a tribe. If someone does something, other people say, "Well, how did you do that? How did that happen?" So yeah, the word is spreading, and this week is a good moment for us. Absolutely. Our addiction awareness talks. We've been given some very kind testimonials. The Bank of England has made it onto there already. Well done to my marketing team. But we talk about things such as, at the bottom, I've struggled with anxiety, and what you said about connection really spoke to me. I love being with people and talking about mental health when it matters. We've spoken at all manner of firms. I've spoken at organisations where, sadly, there have been individuals there that have taken their own life. And the response to it was amazing, but also the ripple effect is still felt by employees. I can tell you that because they sent me messages afterwards on LinkedIn or on email saying, I was thinking about it today, and I was talking to a family member at home about the talk and stuff like that. And yeah, the trauma still felt, but I hope the work we do, and indeed the work of This Is Me in this grounded lived experience really, really does help. So alcohol awareness work, why it matters at every organization. So we talk about cultural shift, not crisis management, and that's a really good way of putting it. I don't know if anyone saw in the press last week that a barrister's been fined by the SRA because he was found to be drinking between court cases. Now, I'm sure there were a few sniggers at this, and I saw some quite unkind comments online about this, being a barrister and maybe he'll be in the dock for once, all of that stuff. But let's not forget there's an individual at the heart of this. And I'm sure he's not sitting in his car drinking, having a great time. I'm sure that comes from, I don't know circumstances, but I imagine he has an unhealthy relationship with alcohol. And I think it's um, what we're trying to avoid is the reason you find out a colleague or a client or a colleague is suffering is reading about it in the newspaper or finding out they've been let go or finding out that they've taken their own life, sadly. We can get there before that. So, I mean, here is about addiction. 27% of employees cite as a reason for drinking more stress. I mean, um, addiction is often hidden behind high performance and long hours. Isn't that the truth? Alcohol is responsible for 30% of all recorded accidents. I'm not going to go through it and re-emphasize the points, but it's so important to realize that when you are struggling, you don't put your hand up. You wait because you don't know what's going on. You're very secretive. We talk about the word stigma, and we say a lot of the titles of our internal talks start with, shattering the stigma, for example. And that's so important at every level of seniority. Some senior leaders find it even harder to confide because who's going to go up to them and say, "Are you okay? Are you struggling? You smell of alcohol today?" That takes a brave colleague to do that. And we talk about early awareness building trust. And trust is just so key. And when we go in and do our talks, I share with them about to when Harry and I talk, and Harry, courageously shared his own story, the power of that, the trust it creates. It almost produces like a thawing aspect in the environment. You can feel it, and I've seen that firsthand. And also, presenteeism. We talk about that often. And 1.4 billion pounds annually. Okay, that's a big number, but what does that look like? Well, when I spoke recently to a room full of lawyers, someone was telling me who's now sober and suffered for a long time. She was saying that frequently she would go in and push her mouse around all day till she had to do some work. She would do just enough. But the point was, I wasn't off sick. I was in the office and I was showing up. And that's another way of making yourself invisible. And when you do the bare minimum, it doesn't feel great, etc. And people don't want to do the bare minimum, but much harder to see. And then you can justify it to yourself. It can't be that bad. I went to work today. It can't be that bad. I'm in the office today with everyone else, but I assure you it is. And that presenteeism, that will affect quality of work to clients. It'll affect, efficiencies, all innovation, all of these things. So I end there here with everyone in the organization can help shape a healthier, safer culture. It starts with leadership. I know I'm preaching to the choir here because this is me event, but really, really, really important. And yeah, we are incredibly passionate about that. We need the buy-in from organizations and leadership, but we are now getting that. And yeah, we all have our part to play. I wanted to include us just a quick piece on does gender make a difference when talking about addiction? Because it's a question that's come up. It's not the most common one, but it does come up. And yes, it does matter, and we need to talk about it more, frankly. We have men and women, as you'll remember, I hope from my second slide, we have men and women from different backgrounds sharing their lived experience, but which is incredibly powerful. But we also must be very honest about the data that we've seen. Men delay getting help. They're conditioned to be strong, silent, and sorted. Silence kills. Movember talk a lot about that, and I know it's more nuanced than that, and I know this is quite general, but for the purposes of this talk, I think it's helpful to touch on it. Women face different pressures. I cannot speak to the experience of a woman in the corporate world of alcohol, but what I've heard, there's a lot of shame, there's a lot of stigma. Often they're the caregiver for everyone else, and they suffer in silence to protect their job, reputation, and family. I've had a lot of women talk to me about their drinking behavior, and oh, I'd have a glass of wine to kind of celebrate at work, although I do work at home on my laptop occasionally. That's now turned into a bottle, and I think that's quite a lot. And again, one, sometimes two bottles of wine at night might seem socially, oh yeah, drinking a bit much, but what does that mean when you're emailing clients late thing at night? Drinking two bottles of wine and emailing clients, often doesn't end well. So just something to think about. I'll go into that in a bit more detail. Men are statistically more likely to misuse substances in high pressure cultures that promote alcohol use as stress relief or celebration. I've lived that and I've seen that, and absolutely it's true. Women, interestingly, escalate faster into dependence, and there's a fascinating paper from the National Library of Medicine that talks about that telescoping, where the velocity of it moves so quickly, they're more likely to use substances to self-medicate for anxiety or trauma. The CEO of Law Care, a wonderful woman called Elizabeth Rimmel, was telling me that over 60% of the people who call are women who reach out for help first. But relapse patterns are interesting. It is all very, it's all about the individual. But what I will say is that it's it's all about not asking for help. And yes, there are different ways of doing this, and there are delays and stuff like that, and women are more likely to complete treatment. But it's all the same things in the middle: shame, secrecy, isolation, the need for connection, compassion, all of these things that unless you are suffering, you might not understand. But I can tell you, in other areas of your life, you might identify with that. A lack of connection, being online all day, the lack of compassion, maybe like Harry said, in society, it's quite a scary time. Maybe one could argue there's a lack of kindness. I think you could argue that. So it's not a one size fits all solution. But again, addiction, alcohol, drugs, whatever it might be, shopping, chocolate. These aren't moral failings. They're a response to pain. I had a response to pain. Harry had one, and many others. And recovery is a human right, not a gendered one. Is I think a nice point to end there. So in high performing environments, which I'm sure many of us are familiar with, I just wanted to talk about what that looks like. And I won't go through all of these, but I say here, you don't lose your home for being a workaholic. You seldom get in trouble if you're excelling at work, which is all very true. I've a friend of mine, he was 5 months sober, doing well, in a firm. Partner came up to him, said, "Come over and talk to the other senior partners. We are incredibly impressed with you and well done." Gave him a glass of champagne, and without blinking, he drank it. He then had, which I knew about very intimately, about 4 months of real chaos was he was trying to get sober again. And the answer to that was, he just didn't want to have the conversation. He just said to me, I couldn't, in that moment, I could not say I have a problem with alcohol. I couldn't even think of anything to say. What you can say is I don't drink, and that's the end of it, and they won't, they'll get over it. But in that moment, you are so full of anxiety and you want to do well, and oh gosh, if I say that to my big boss, then maybe I won't get invited out to business development stuff. And actually, maybe I should just drink. And that's what it can do to you. And I tell you that as someone that's been through that. Um, I had a leader say to me recently, at the beginning of the year, maybe it would be different now, but he said to me, I don't think addiction or alcoholism is a problem in this organization. And I said, oh, okay, that's interesting. How many people work at your organization? A little over 2,200. I thought, okay, if you had 22 people only, you still wouldn't know. And I didn't say that to kind of be curt with it. I just meant that the reality is, A, it's hidden. B, you are senior leadership, so you really won't know if someone's hiding. But then also, that if there are so many people and we're looking at 1 in 5 have maybe problematic drinking or drinking that they find might be an issue, we're talking about hundreds of people, sometimes thousands in these global organizations. But even in smaller organizations, even if one or two, that's enough. And then equally, we do these talks and we talk about how it's not just going to be the people in the room, it's going to be their family members. How often, I mean, I've received so many messages about I had an alcoholic father, mother, brother, sister, neighbor. This has been really helpful, and maybe it helps with our own judgment as well. Alcoholics aren't necessarily people that are, sadly on the streets or sleeping on park benches. They're people who walk around Moorgate, who are busy, who, bump into you and say that they're on the way to meetings. So the role of stigma, as I say, it's not a moral failing. I say that a lot of times because it's really not, but it does make people leave jobs. It does make people think that they are so singular and I have to leave, and it doesn't have to be like that. This stigma kills people. It genuinely does. I know someone that sadly died of a drug overdose. I first met him when I was 13 and he was 11. He died at 38. And I can tell you what it's done to his family is just been like, as you can imagine, what it'll do to all of our families, just like cataclysmic and shocking. And, it's so common. And cultural shifts, it doesn't happen by accident, but going back to the person saying, I don't think it happens in my organization, I'm sorry, that's not appropriate anymore. You just can't say that. You just don't know. And that type of messaging filters down. And if the senior leaders are saying, well, that's a bit of a fringe issue, that will become the narrative. Does your organization do work on alcohol addiction awareness? No, not really. We find that that's something else. But then we work with organizations who want to lead the conversation in this space, and that's how you package it. We're leading the conversation in this evolving space. And the fact that it's Alcohol Awareness Week gives us that an easy kind of way to start. So I wanted to have a slide here about how do we distinguish between use and problem use? Only because I wouldn't normally do this in kind of an introduction to organization, but I think it's really helpful because as takeaways, I hope you can, use some of this because it's hard to find out what is the difference between heavy drinking, excessive drinking, alcoholism. What does it all mean? And what I can say is that it doesn't look like chaos from the beginning. It really doesn't, and again, it can be a slippery slope, right? It can be one thing at the beginning and then slowly it becomes something else that is completely out of control. And people say, how did it get to this point? Well, it got to this point by unchecked behavior all the way through until there's a crisis. So ask yourself, so let's use alcohol. Is alcohol in your life now for survival, not enjoyment? You know, that's not dramatic language. Have you ever got to the end of the week and thought, oh my goodness, I can't wait to go to the pub? I certainly did. My drinking in the end took me to drinking on my own, and I would get anxious at the end of a work day so I could cycle home and drink in my room all day, all weekend. Are you hiding it, planning around it, justifying it? All of these things are very easy in isolation to disregard, but collectively they do start to form a picture. and we got the warning signs here. And just here, I would also challenge you to think about addictive behaviors in general. I had someone, we were having a, a very open conversation, and she said to me, "Oh, this is embarrassing. I don't think it's serious enough to talk about in this conversation, but I do have a bit of an Amazon problem." And it turned out she was ordering up to 10, 12 Amazon packages a day. I said, "Okay, well, let's think about it. Is it secretive?" "Oh, yes, absolutely." "Okay. Is it compulsive?" "Yes, I do, and I don't really want to be doing it." "Okay. Are you justifying it?" "Well, yes, it's not that serious." The fact that she said this is not serious, but justification, then the impact, having to return all the stuff, the embarrassment, all of that stuff. And I mention that because let's not trivialize things that we don't think are issues. Because is it as serious as doing class A drugs at work? No. Could it lead to that? Maybe. Because when bad behavior starts, it it can affect your world. I mean, look at fraud. Look at the risk factors, right? Look at fraud. In the corporate world, fraud, the amount of people I've worked with who have gambling issues, and they always say, "I just want one big win and I'll pay it all back." Transfer that to the working environment where people are working with money that isn't their own, things like that. Look at the famous trading instance of the past. And this isn't just confined to the corporate world. In a paper by the Journal of Business Ethics published in 2023, doctors who engage in substance abuse are between 50 and 100 times more likely to commit fraud in a given year. That result is consistent with the research suggesting that substance abuse creates financial pressures and impairs the functioning of cognitive self-regulatory self mechanisms, which is written by someone much smarter than me, clearly. But, again, it starts with that and then it ends with that. So, I just really want to think about that. And addiction thrives in places where people aren't comfortable saying, "I am not okay." And that's really something to think about. Again, This Is Me is an unbelievably brilliant initiative and it promotes all of the things I hope I'm kind of trying to get across, but it really does. It really does. So the addiction awareness talks, yeah, we go in again. These are super high level, and we do much deeper dives if you like. But on the left hand side, we do for something for the first time. Sometimes people are seeing things like this, and that's incredible for people to see. The first time they'll ever see. Okay, getting help early. Recovery starts with honesty. It doesn't start with rehab. All of these things that people wouldn't know. I'm conscious of time. I'm going to wrap up in a moment, but yeah, recovery is possible. You're not alone is something that I get across to everyone. Retire, prioritizing self-care. No is a complete sentence. I can't, I'm too busy. Don't have capacity right now. How to support a colleague. We ask this all the time, and I'm delighted to talk about it. Yesterday, how do I help someone I think struggling? Find a private moment, lead them with compassion, not confrontation. If someone's going through a hard time, the last thing they need is, "Hey, we've been noticing that you're behaving erratically. Come to this meeting." Don't do that. That is just going to drive it even further underground. It's not our job to diagnose people in the workplace, but what you can do is listen. You can't fix them maybe, but it's your job to open the door and let them know that support exists. And asking twice, I'm sure, is, of course, that's something that we know really well, and that's taught, I'm delighted to say, to children at assemblies, I found out recently at school. But asking twice is so crucial. Asking once shows that you care, twice shows that you mean it. And it's saying, "I see you, I care." I'm going to touch on a story in a moment about my past, but what I wouldn't have given for someone to ask me twice. You know, I really, when I was struggling, I was almost scared to be asked twice because twice would have meant that the floodgates would have opened. Literally, I would have just collapsed in your arms. But yeah, I'm busy. How are you? Fine, busy. How's your weekend? Busy. Those words can keep us invisible, and again, we're full of there are wonderful people on this call all trying to do the right thing. But leading with compassion, not confrontation, is huge. And wording such as "you seemed a little bit withdrawn lately. I just want to check in with you." No accusations, but just "I care about you." Stuff like that. Again, I'm happy to kind of go into that in more detail if you ever want to talk to me. And our penultimate slide, but yeah, our last one. How do we open up the conversation in workplace and society more broadly? Well, it starts with stories, doesn't it? It's so important to bring lived experience. I used to think that my kind of lived experience was my shame and things that I shouldn't talk about. And I've spoken in prisons, as I say, the Bank of England yesterday, Magic Circle law firms, organized banks, all of it. We speak everywhere because it's so important. We're human beings. And actually, we're in a really stressful job sometimes, in a really stressful world, and a really stressful sector. So, creating the safety, not the shame. I just want to touch on this story just briefly. I did a talk 2 weeks ago. And there was 100 people in the room. Out of 100 people, 11 came up to me and talked about their own issues. So, it made the maths very easy. 11% of the people in that room came up to me, walked up to me and said, I need to tell you this. That means that maybe another 10 didn't, but wanted to. But one person struck me, and she was sitting at the front. And during my talk, I did my own story. I spoke for an hour or so, and then another. We did a workshop in the latter part of the afternoon. She had tears in her eyes during the talk. And I was looking at her thinking, gosh, I wonder if she's had a bereavement and, she's just found out about it because she was looking at her phone and stuff like that. But at the end of it, when we went for our lunch to get our croissant and orange juice, she came up to me and said, can we talk? I said, of course. And she told me, I've got cocaine in my system. I bought it a number of times this week. I've got two children under 10. I think I'm going to have a heart attack. I'm terrified. I've never spoken about this. And she said to me, I feel like I was meant to come today. I've been missing things recently, but I've meant to come to this. So anyway, I just want to use that as, not anyway. I given her help, and she's, hopefully doing a lot better. But the point I'm making is that just that chink, that little bit of me talking at the front got her to compelled to tell me like loads of stuff about her. And it's my pleasure to do that, and it's a privilege to do that. But my goodness, if that's just one person, there's so many others. So cultural change begins with courage. And before I stop sharing my screen, we talk a lot about, the ROI, and even Matt and myself and Harry were talking about it earlier. For every £1 spent, you get your employer gets £4.70, etc. The Deloitte study, all of that we all know and we see all the time, and particularly around Mental Health Week, it was everywhere. I just want to also kind of maybe shift that to the benefits for the individual. Yes, we are helping people get out of dark places. Yes, we are shining a light, and we are shattering stigma, and that's all wonderful stuff. And if we only did that, that would be fantastic. But we also say as well, we're also turning the lights on in some of these people, in their eyes, in their minds, in their hearts. Innovation gets it just gets ramped up. Engagement, retention, the image of your organization, all of these things come. It's not just about helping people get out of the hole they're in and all of that. I tell you, as someone that has gone through it, and someone that is in recovery, and someone that, before would turn up to work if I could, and push my mouse around and stuff, I can tell you it's amazing, and the benefits to organizations and the economy in general, it's huge. The billions are wasted at the moment on this because we're not doing enough. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen there. We have a QR code for feedback that I'm going to share in our chat later. Hopefully Matt can do that. But everyone, thank you so much for listening. I'll stop sharing my screen now, and Harry and I can chat.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much, Steve. It was that's a lot in a short amount of time, and yeah, I was just making notes of a few things, but I just think thank you for kind of going through in the way that you did. A few things that I kind of took note of was that the importance of it's not a problem, but ask me twice. That is so powerful. Are you justifying it? Are you planning around it? That has really made me think about certain things in my own personal life, people close to me, and I think that has so much power in that. I remember a conversation, I had with a company in America about 3 years ago, and there was a story around a manager who had asked twice around exactly what you described there, and that person now speaks globally on the topic of addiction and the importance of that manager conversation. So it's really really powerful, and I think I shared, I have a diagnosis of ADHD, and I kind of learned a lot around that over, the last couple of years around kind of impulse control and times when I probably look back into my life and where I actually did exactly what you just described, and where I wish I had someone to kind of ask me twice at some of those points. And yeah, so I think that was really, really amazing. But I want to stop and ask you what's so important about this week for you? I know the answer to this, but I would love to just kind of give you the floor to share kind of your story, please.
Thanks, Harry, and thanks for that feedback. And even someone like you who sees this not exactly this type of work, but well, this type of work, even that you can get little tips here and there. And I hope that's been the case for other people listening. There are certain things that you think, oh gosh, that is a good point. And I hope that's been helpful for you. So my story, in 10 minutes or so, I spoke for an hour recently, so I'm not going to give you the director's cut. I'll give you why I care about this. alcohol and drug addiction was a huge part of my life. But for alcohol awareness, it means a lot to me because, as I alluded to in kind of my presentation there, I come from yeah, I had incredibly difficult upbringing with alcohol. My family are from uh, Glasgow, Scotland, Ireland, etc. And alcohol in my family was just it ran riot. Ran riot. My uncle Peter died when I was 50, when he was 50 rather. And when he died, I remember being 13 and I was devastated when I lost him. But I remember thinking, well, 50 is quite old actually, so I'll be fine for a while, you know. But the older I get, of course, 50 is very young to die in those circumstances. And I just want to touch on something that happened. So we moved out. So I grew up in West London on an estate in West London, and it's one of these estates where we didn't have much money, frankly, but it was all very happy. We all kind of played together and stuff. My mum worked in a local pub, so I was one of those kids that survived on, salt and vinegar potatoes and Diet Coke and loved it. But something very serious happened to our family when I was 10. We had neighbours that were transpired they were selling drugs, hard drugs, and my dad was going to inform on them and tell. And they were a family that kind of were notoriously. They were a notorious local family. They had lots of people that would always come to their house, at all hours of the night, and they launched a vendetta against my family. And long story, they I'd get followed home. They were putting syringes through our letterbox, stuff like that. I found stuff in the garden. There was a guy in our garage with lighter fuel once, stuff like that. And we had to move, and the police came with like a team and moved us overnight. I was told to go to my school and say goodbye to my friends, and I would never come back. And we got relocated to a different area of London. I've never seen my friends since, like my best friends growing up. And the reason I mention that is, yeah, it was extreme and like shocking, but it just changed the way alcohol was in my household. Like there was so much fear, and I think my dad had a lot of like shame about maybe running away and stuff like that. And it was shocking, and that kind of gave me this just intense. It was like a lobster pot in my childhood growing up, and alcohol was just horrendous in my family growing up, and it made me incredibly anxious. Like, I don't know anyone's other experiences with alcohol and drug abuse, but for me, it was as soon as I found alcohol, I just felt differently, and it made me just made me calmer. I started having an interest in law in my teens. Got a job like the most junior person possible in a magistrate's court, so I worked there for a summer and had an interest in doing that with my life. But then, frankly, my teenage years were just horrendous and disastrous. And but because of whenever I was having a hard time, I'd always read lots of books, and I hadn't always understood how things worked. I just had a knack for it. I could get through exams and stuff. So I'd go to university, and oh my goodness, the drug use and alcohol at uni. I think one day someone should really look at that and create some kind of program for people joining university. In my small circle, I had, for those of you who joined university, you might have experienced it, but in my small circle, I had someone lost his life due to drug use. Someone got arrested for selling drugs. Numerous people had to leave the course and go home because they spent all their student loan. All of these things. But I was hiding in plain sight because no one was telling me to stop. I'm going to do 5 minutes of kind of what I did to change that, but I can't stress to you what it was like when I left university and came to the City of London. All I wanted to do was stomp around Moorgate when I was a kid. That's all I wanted to do was get a job in Moorgate, work in the city. It's all I cared about. So when I got a job in at firms, I had all this unchecked behavioral stuff, but alcohol wise, I couldn't handle client events. I couldn't handle any form of anything. I just couldn't handle it. I was so anxious, so depressed looking back. And yeah, sadly, I took an overdose about 10 years ago, which was, I didn't specifically sit there thinking I'm going to kill myself right now. But what I do remember saying to myself is, I don't want to wake up tomorrow. So I don't care what happens. I just can't be woken up. I mean, I just don't want to wake up. And I also I went down to Goose Street once and tried to jump front of a train about 9 years ago when it was really bad, and I was in my suit and I was incredibly distressed. And when like the train was coming and stuff, people were around me because it was obvious that I was someone that they had to, something was going on. And I remember wriggling away from this group of people that were all well-meaning, but I couldn't be there. And I went to see my sister, and my sister lives in High Barnet, and mistakenly I went to New Barnet, and New Barnet has a huge bridge. And I remember sitting at the bottom of the bridge looking up at all the steps. And I remember thinking, I can't cross this bridge because I'm going to jump off it. Like my feet weren't my own. It was such a peculiar feeling. So I didn't cross it for about an hour and I sat underneath it. And I just sobbed my eyes out, thinking, what am I going to do? And we talk about asking twice. And the weekend, the Monday after that happened, and it was all weekend. It wasn't just that. It was, I was drinking. It was horrendous. I remember on Monday morning, someone came up to me, and I felt like I'd been in a war. I was exhausted. I'd been drinking, all of that. And someone said, "How was your weekend?" And I went, "Good, busy," you know. And I remember thinking, God, if he asked me again, I'm going to fall to pieces. And he didn't. And not because he was a bad person. He just was busy. See you later. Great. See you later for the meeting, whatever. Asking twice, and yeah, it was horrendous. I was drinking 10 to 12 bottles of red wine a day, pint of wine before work, drinking at work, and it was horrendous. And I can go on for hours, honestly. It was so awful, and I hated it. I was 7 stone in weight. I couldn't be anywhere near alcohol without just destroying myself. And I met a partner who knew, who quickly identified that it was an issue, and she stuck with me when many people said that she shouldn't. I behaved appallingly at one of her family weddings, and it was shocking. And anyway, yeah, lots of things happened where the next day she turned up at my flat and was like, "Look, I don't, we're not getting back together, but we need to, I'm worried about leaving you because I'm worried what you're going to do to yourself." And she was right to be worried, frankly. I didn't put it on her. I just said, well, leave me, you should leave me alone because I'm a lost cause. But I wasn't a lost cause. And that day we sat down and wrote out a list of things I would do. And the first one was getting honest. And I was like, I am honest, but I wasn't getting honest about what I was doing. I went to a doctor's and he said to me, and he's known me for years, and he said, "Okay, how much are you drinking?" And I would normally say, "I have a glass or two of wine when I watch TV, etc." And then I said, "Yeah, 10 to 12 bottles of wine. This is my drug use. I'm making myself sick every day." I was 7 stone at that point, so I was wearing jumpers under my suits, and he gave me a very bleak outlook on life. But what happened was, yeah, I mean, in the last few minutes, I had what it feels miraculous. I asked for help, and I got help, and for the first year of recovery, I would go home every day, and I would look at the clock because I didn't know what to do. My whole life I've been drinking. I would, if you're not going to pubs every day, what do you do? And I didn't know what to do. So I'd go home and lock myself in my room. And I promise you, at night, it would say midnight, day 9, midnight, day 100, midnight, day 200. We're getting somewhere. And finally, the day came when I was a year sober. And that was a really wonderful moment. But my wife said to me, who's now my wife, she said to me, "Yeah, you're a year sober, but you're not living well. This is quite miserable existence." So I said, "Yep, fair point." So I started looking to the outwards, and that was really the beginning of my organization. I started looking outwards. Initially, I started working with homeless people. I joined a mentoring charity for young people. I'm now the deputy chair of the board of trustees. There's a documentary about me on Sky about being a world mental health champion for the Lawn Tennis Association. I started playing tennis again after 20 years. I've gone to prisons, and so on. And yesterday, in fact, wonderfully on Alcohol Awareness Week, I was 7 years sober. So 7 years without alcohol and drugs, which is like unbelievable. Even saying it just feels crazy. My wife had a surprise party for me, and I'm sure onlookers thought it was a 7-year-old's birthday party because there was a few balloons saying "Happy seventh anniversary," but it was for me. And yeah, I'm sure I'm missing stuff. I'm missing stuff out. But I started MCG because basically during COVID. I started something called a drop-in bench, which was where the Law Gazette did a feature on it, where I'd invite people from financial and legal services world to come to this bench and talk. And it would always start with, "I don't really have a problem, but I'd like to just talk to you about something." And that would end with, "I'm drinking vodka between Zoom calls." I had one chap who works at a big bank was saying he had 2 bottles of wine before driving his toddler to nursery. All of these things. So now I sit on the Lord Mayor's Appeal. The organisation is growing. We're working with clients all over the place, and it all comes from being honest. And we don't just do one-offs now. We have real partnership with organisations. We do programs that are exciting, and yeah, it's amazing. And I'm so grateful just to forgetting all of that for a moment personally. What it's given me in my life is a dream come true, really. Yes, do I face hardships? Yeah, I do. I've got a daughter that was in Great, it's been in Great Ormond Street her whole life. We live in a Great Ormond Street for 20 months. Is that hard? Yeah, but I've never drank once or used. I've been there for my family. I tried to be a inspiration for other parents going through hard things, and that's where I am today. And that all comes from being honest. And yeah, I couldn't be more grateful to be alive, but just to be understanding that, the power of someone of me saying my story and someone saying, "I've never seen anyone say that before," much like the woman who, was talking about her drug use. is profound and powerful. So that's my story. That's why I'm here today, and I'm just delighted to be here, and it's a real pleasure.
Brilliant. No, it is really amazing, and thank you for your kind of honesty and sharing. And you much of that, but it's really interesting when you kind of say it, and it's when you do have a bit of time pressure as well. It's interesting things that you pull out, and it makes you then think there's so much more in each of those things. But no, absolutely, incredible, and it's such a great kind of moment for you this week, and I'm sure for your family and friends as well. And so I would like to just open the floor to any questions in the chat. So we can start typing your questions. And whilst we do that, I'm going to ask you just a question, Steve. It's a slight, not complete change to what I was going to ask. But
Yeah.
I remember I took note in my phone about a year ago. There was a World Health Organization kind of study, and it found that in the UK we had the worst rate of child alcohol consumption, but youth drinking had declined sharply in this country. But we still had the world's highest level of consumption by alcohol. And it was for we hear, I think, that attitudes to alcohol are changing in the younger generation. That's still the case. And I just know that you're very passionate about young people, whether personally, I know you do a lot of that because you work to help people into kind of work and lots of mentoring programs. What's your hope for the future and those young people coming into the world of work?
Yeah, great question, and one that I think about often. I work with young people from under-resourced communities, and I really see it firsthand as a mentor. I'm not only a trustee, I'm also a mentor, and there's a lack of guidance for young people right now. There seems to be the gulf, which was widened during COVID. I work with a lot of kids who some of them don't have, laptops, some of them don't have access to the information that others do. My hope for the future is that vulnerability becomes one of the mainstays of society. I think kind of the willing, the chasing financial goals and equating success with followers online and being, I have a 16-year-old mentee who talks about being a billionaire by the age of 19. They just have different, but then again, we have to meet them where they are, right? It's easy to say, oh, well, kids these days, well, they're always on their phones, all of that. But, 30, 20 years ago, whatever, we were that. So I think you've got to meet them where they are, much the same as you've got to meet people with addiction issues where they are. Part of it's all part of society. And I say to people, I say, look, you might not agree with the TikTok creators who work at your firm, but they're still your workforce and they still do your work. So you have to work with them, irrelevant of what you think about their politics, what they do, the fact that they don't answer emails on their holiday, whatever. There's a whole new wave of people coming through. And again, they were the young people taught in assemblies, ask twice, be kind. I never was taught that in assemblies at school, So I think my hope is I am hopeful. I
Hmm.
am hopeful, and I think it comes from stuff like, this is me. I think it comes from people like us, people on this group, talking about the issues we go through. I did a presentation about it was meant to be about my career and life to a group of 14-year-olds, but I specifically talked about kindness and how to be kind and how to use vulnerability as a superpower. Power. And they were coming up to me afterwards, and they'd not heard that language, and they were saying someone said to me, "You've told me that you can be strong if you're weak." I don't mean it like that, sir, because they call me sir. That I don't mean it like that, but that's what I got from it. I said, "Well, yeah, that is a form of it, isn't it?" And let's all think about that. And so I'm very hopeful, but we have to be loud and proud about it, and we have to shout about it because we have to have leaders talking about it like that. And hopefully that's changing. And we can only influence what we can do, but we really do have a platform here to do a lot of great work.
Hmm. But thank you very much, Steve. Um, so, question for you. It came through under kind of the chat feature here. So, as someone who's struggled with alcohol addiction, do you think it should be a legal substance?
Do I think alcohol should be a legal substance?
Yeah.
That's a good question. If alcohol was discovered today, it would probably be illegal. It's a very complex and nuanced conversation about the differences between this and, smoking with drugs or whatever.
Hmm.
It's a difficult one, isn't it? I mean, much like other things that are very debatable, in the hands of the wrong people or in the hands of people that can't handle it. But I strongly think if it was discovered today, it certainly wouldn't be as widespread as it is now. I mean, as in my first year of recovery, I almost had to wear a blindfold walking down the street. 2-for-1 shots, Happy Fridays. I walked past the pub recently that says, "Forget your therapist for a while and come in here." I saw that, and I just
Yeah.
thought, God, that's so dangerous. But then equally, I can't force my opinions on people. I don't stand in pubs, walking around with a sandwich board saying alcohol is bad. I don't do that. But what I can do is show people who are struggling through my positive message, they can change the way they feel. And I try and do that. I'm very known amongst my circles and indeed in wider circles as someone that can be approached to talk to, and I'm delighted to do it. But yeah, I mean, it causes a lot of issues, alcohol, in health. I mean, everything. I think we need a bit of a wake-up call regarding it. And maybe hopefully we'll get one. But just on that point, the government's 10-year health plan, which talks about prevention and community case care and right and based care, and rightfully so. It had silence. It had real kind of near silence on alcohol harm. And they talked about bold measures like minimum pricing and restrictions, but they've been reportedly dropped after industry pushback. So it's like the tobacco reckoning we had years ago, or the gambling one that is going
Yeah.
on right now. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I asked you to multitask now, Steve. So I want you to
Yes.
try and answer this question in short fire. But could you pop up the QR code? So I know that people will slowly go on because people will have 11 o'clock meetings. So I know exactly what it's
Yeah.
like. And I
Yeah. Yeah.
know
Yeah.
these people will. What I'm going to do is, so the QR code is going to be on the screen. It's really, really important. Just 1 minute of your time to do this, please, before you go, because it massively helps, Matt and all of us really to kind of, help shape how we support you and also how you found this type of session, what you want to hear more of. So please, could you scan this QR code here? That would be absolutely, absolutely invaluable. I know everyone says it, but please, please, please do that. And then we do have time for a very quick fire question. So, anonymous attendee, when you ask someone how they are and they say busy, what is the second follow-up question? This person says they sometimes take it that I don't want to talk about this kind of idea is coming through when
Yeah.
someone says busy. Hard
Yeah.
question, but yeah, what do you say?
Yeah, good one. For that, I would say try and find a private moment. I mean, if someone is busy in the middle of something, then you can really, respect that. Also, as someone who my friends and family try to do an intervention on me. I know that's not an intervention, but they tried to do an intervention on me. It was after a particularly awful 2 days of drinking, and my life was just not great at the time. And it absolutely infuriated me and filled me with shame. And I went even deeper into a hole. What you
Mm.
can do is just because you said to someone, "How are you?" and they said, "I'm busy," you could then follow it and say, "Look, I'm only asking because you seem a bit withdrawn and I care about you." You can leave it there and walk away. You don't have to then wait for their response. The fact that they've heard that will stay with them. They won't be like, leave me alone. Just say, look, I've noticed you've been withdrawn. I'm just checking in. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. I find something like, I went to a talk recently on how to look out for colleagues, and it was really interesting. If you ever want to talk about that, let's do it. Make them part of the conversation rather than that, because don't forget, if they are hungover or anxious or, or drunk at the time, perhaps their senses will be ramped up to a disproportionate level. They will be paranoid and they will feel like, gosh, people are talking about me. It's that bad that people are asking me how I am. So I think just say, how are you? And then again, you struck me as being a bit withdrawn. I just hope you're okay. Then you can leave it there. And then maybe the next time you approach them, it will be a bit easier. But it's all about choosing the moment, I think. And also, if you're a bit unsure about that, find out someone that they're very close to at work and talk to them. Ask them if they found out, but maybe, get them to approach them as well. Anything that helps in that respect, I think is to be encouraged.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Just to say, Laura, a massive thank you for your kind of private message on the message to others. Much appreciated. And saying to a few others who are there, Amanda, that's absolutely incredible that you shared that. I don't want to, thank you, very kind. So this is the first time she's had people speak openly about that and also talks kind of about, her journey and actually how else can we support, female professionals. We're never going to be able to do that justice in 30 seconds, but have a couple of ideas. I'm sure Steve has a couple of ideas, so maybe we'll pick that up offline and just purely out of interest. Everyone running away now onto their days, but hopefully sunshine wherever you are, and have a lovely rest of your day. And thank you so much for joining, and hope we can see you all again soon. But yeah,
Bye,
thank you so
everyone.
much, Steve. Everything you've done today too. Cheers, mate.
Likewise, you too, Harry. Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.